Hey guys, it's Cam for Investors Underground. Welcome to another trader interview. I'm currently with Nate at the IU headquarters in New Hampshire. It seems like every year that I come out to visit, the desks and monitors in here are multiplying. Right now, there are enough screens to light up a small village. Our guest today is no stranger from the screens himself, both in his role on the big screen as a presenter at CNBC and his experience with the small screens in the pit of the Chicago Exchange as an options trader. He's a man of many talents, and we're hoping to explore some of them over the next half hour or so. It really is our pleasure to be able to chat with you for a little while. Jon Najarian.
Hey, Cam. Hello, Nate. Great to be with you guys. Thank you.
It's our pleasure. So we're going to get things started with a few background questions. Then we'll likely dig deep into some hard-hitting topics like which family member has a better-looking ponytail.
Oh, all right.
And finally, to wrap it up, we're planning a Mad Money-style speed round. But to kick things off, tell us a bit about your history. Whereabouts did you grow up, and what was life like as a Nigerian kid?
Well, let's see. So Cam and Nate, I grew up in San Francisco. That's where I was born. We used to go down and visit the hippies all the time down at Haight-Ashbury. My dad used to, he was the surgeon in San Francisco and ultimately got offered the job of chief of surgery back at the University of Minnesota. But while we were living in San Francisco, doctors from all over the world would visit us because, knock on wood, that's where I got my nickname from my dad, Dr. J. He is John as well. I'm the oldest of four boys. So when doctors would visit him from around the world, we would always drive them down to Haight-Ashbury to see the freaks. And the doctors just loved it because it was actually pretty cool to see hippies. This is back in the, late 60s, early 70s. And he'd drive them down and he'd say, hey, roll up the windows, though, guys. We don't want any of the lice jumping in.
Too good.
But we always had a pretty good time just kind of hanging out, doing fun things in the Bay Area. And then while my dad was teaching and so forth, we lived briefly in La Jolla, so just out by San Diego, and then in Pittsburgh, but only for 1 year in Pittsburgh, and actually enjoyed both those places as well. And then we moved to Minnesota, and I lived there till I was, I think, 20. Loved Minnesota. It was cold as heck in the winter. It's not nearly as cold anymore. Thank God for global warming. You might not appreciate it as much, Cam, being an Australian, but I certainly, when I was living up in Minnesota, I appreciated every winter where it wasn't 70 below zero. Minnesota gets colder than Siberia.
Look, honestly, I struggle with anything that's below 65 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's crazy when that cold air sweeps out of Canada and comes on down. But nonetheless, we grew up hanging outside. You know, I remember skiing when it was 30, 40 below zero. So then I went to junior college and then college and ended up here in Chicago as a free agent for the Chicago Bears. So that's more or less what got me to Chicago in the first place. And I loved the city so much, I wanted to stay. And my agent was putting traders on the floor when they were either in their off season or when they were done with their career. And it was pretty clear after the Bears cut me that I was done with my career, short as it was, 4 games. So I really wanted to stay in Chicago. So that's what got me here. That's more or less the first 22 years of my life.
So what do you think it is about trading and athleticism where there seems to be a bit of a crossover? You know, elite athletes also sometimes turn their hands to trading and are quite successful at it.
I've always said, Cam, that it's the discipline. If you're a good athlete, doesn't matter if it's skiing, rugby, soccer, football, baseball. If you're a good athlete, good enough to play at a high level, you have to have discipline. You wouldn't have got there if you didn't have discipline. And that's clearly something that Nate preaches and makes sure that people at Investors Underground are aware of. And we try to, my brother Pete and I over at Market Rebellion, we try to preach that same discipline because you've got to be disciplined about taking profits and losses. A lot of people really think about just the oh, I got to be good, disciplined about taking losses. But if you're not being disciplined about profits, you're probably not going to be around too long either. So I think discipline is the number one thing. And, of course, a lot of athletes, I know Nate, I think, is a skier, as am I, and you're competitive. So athletes are competitive, traders in the pit. It's hard to think of anything more competitive than that. I mean, because you're a bunch of alphas, you're in the pits, and you're, fighting over back in the day, every 16th or every 8th, these days over, pennies. And, it is both a thrill to beat other really good guys and gals at that game, and it's also something that is necessary, because if you're in a pit where there's a lot of money to be made, you can bet that there's a lot of really good traders in that pit. And the more money there is to be made in a certain pit, like AOL, where my brother Pete traded, or Micron, where I traded, and IBM and all that stuff, if there's a lot of money to be made, there's a lot of traders there, and it's going to get hyper competitive.
So you and Pete seem to have a bit of a tag team when it comes to interests, both playing football and also in the trading world. Was it that you always shared the same interests, or was it more of a sibling rivalry thing?
I really wouldn't say that there was much of a sibling rivalry, to tell the truth. And Pete's 6 years younger than me, so he always says that I beat him up when I was growing up. I don't remember that at all, and I don't think it's my memory. I think he's thinking of one of my other brothers, because he was, so far down the food chain. I might fight with my brother Dave, who's only 2 years younger, or maybe even my brother Paul, who's 4 years younger. But I'm not as likely to fight with Pete because, I'm a lot older and more mature and all the rest. So it wasn't so much that we had a sibling rivalry. I think it was more like we rooted for each other. We went to each other's games and all that kind of stuff. Pete was a track star as well as a basketball player, hockey player, and football player. And I was really football, skiing, and track. So we ended up running together for track, believe it or not, because when we were younger, we were scrawnier. So we used to run 880 relays. So we'd each run 220, as you might imagine. We actually went to state meets in that. We actually won a number of gold medals and things like that. Sibling rivalry, not so much. We mainly did things together.
Right, I totally get it. So you mentioned when you wrapped up playing football that you kind of just fell into trading. Tell us about the early days of your trading career and when you got started.
Sure. Well, the really early days when I was a runner, which is how you refer to anybody that, when they first come to the floor, they're not much good. I'm sure it's the same way in the Army or the SEALs or anything else that, they probably kind of frown on the new guys because they might grow up to be somebody good, in which case they'll be your competition, or they might just get in the way and be a pain in the butt because they're always asking you questions and things like that. So runners are the lowest form on the trading floors. And so generally people would fight to get a position as a runner, but you don't even get paid usually. It's usually a friend of a friend or a family member that gets you in the door with somebody, and then you're just basically trying to understand things, and they're telling you to go run and get me this, go run and get me that. Not that we ran on the floor. It's that, hey, you're my gopher. Go get me some coffee. Go get me some lunch. Go get me, a bunch of sunflower seeds. Go get me some water. Go get whatever. You're constantly doing that, and if they liked you after a while, they would actually take you under their wing somewhat, and that's when you started to learn. But it's just as with most things, you don't just become somebody's friend. You have to kind of earn it. And so the first 3 months were pretty terrible. But then it got better and better, and I figured things out, and I had a lot of good mentors. And I think you can never, Cam, overrate how much you need a mentor and or a coach. You get better. Anybody that works out regularly knows that, if you have somebody who's helping you and inspiring you and pushing you, you're going to be better. So it's not just a sales pitch for Investors Underground does or what Market Rebellion does, but you really need people who can help you and make you better and push you. And outside of a trading floor, when you're upstairs by yourself, that's much harder. That's why things like what you guys do and what we do, I think, are so important for all the traders and trader wannabes.
Was there something during that 3 months that made you think, hey, trading is really for me. This is what I'm going to do as my career and focus all my energy?
When I remember back that far, which is 38 years ago now, I think about I was already scalping stocks. I'm not saying I was spectacular at it, but I was making a little money scalping stock. And I was just waiting for the light to come on for options because I was not getting it for options. It just wasn't as easy to understand. And I was really good at math. So everybody told me, oh, John, you'll love this. You'll get it right away. I didn't. It took me a while. And then it took me even a greater while to figure out, okay, how do I manage risk in this stuff? Because it moves fast. You've got all these different factors with options that don't really exist in stock. You're just long or short stock. That's it. You bought it because you think it's going up or sold it because you think it's going down. And yeah, there are some nuances and intricacies there because when you borrow stock, to short a stock, you have to be able to borrow it. You have to understand how do you do that. And then, once you understand that if you sell, for instance, $1 million worth of stock, in many cases, you get interest on that $1 million worth of stock as if you put $1 million in a bank account. This is known as short stock interest. Now, in some cases, like when I was starting in 1981, you could make hundreds of thousands of dollars a month shorting stock from the interest. Why? Because interest rates were 11%. Now interest rates are nothing. You can still do it, don't get me wrong, but it's not the same. And meanwhile, hard to borrow stocks, which a lot of what you guys do, I know, is in the hard to borrow realm. That means, of course, folks, if you're a newbie to it, that you can't just sell it. You have to secure it. You have to find a lender and get those shares. And in many cases, most cases, if it's hard to borrow, you have to pay them to borrow shares, which is a new concept to a lot of people, but it's also how you can tell who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth on TV when they're talking about, oh yeah, I shorted a bunch of Tesla at this level and now it's run to such and such, but I'm still okay. And it's like, no, you're not. Not only have you lost money on the stock, but it's a hard to borrow issue. It was one of the largest short interest situations on the big board or on the NASDAQ. You're paying to borrow that thing. And, obviously every new IPO, you have to pay to borrow it if you can even secure one. So it's kind of silly when people tell me about how they're, oh, I shorted this. And I'm like, oh, really? And who did you borrow it from? And they'll just kind of look at you. And you're like, okay, I know you're a fraud. I don't say it on TV, but I just kind of look at them. And you can tell.
Yeah, they probably secured the short in their paper trading account.
Yeah, they're paper trading their shorts. And I'm like, yeah, you're not really here to hunt, are you?
So, John, a lot of our listeners are just getting started out in this game and are probably curious, how long did it take for you to really feel like you had some kind of idea that you knew what you were doing?
Well, I'd say it was just beyond those first 3 months. Right at the peak of my frustration, all of a sudden I started to understand what gamma, the rate of change of delta and things like this, what those really meant. Because just saying them is one thing, but understanding what it really means is something completely different. And if you don't trade options, let me just give you a very quick course on it. In the money options trade an awful lot like stock. So if I thought Tesla was going to go up, let's pick that name. If I thought Tesla was going to go up and it's trading for $780, I would probably want to buy the 750 calls or an in the money call. Stock's trading 780 in this example, and I'm buying the 750 calls. They are $30 in the money. They're going to trade an awful lot like stock. So I don't really need to understand nearly as much about options to trade an in-the-money option because it's going to be so similar to stock. Now let's take the at-the-money, in this case, the 780 call. Those are going to move 50 cents for every dollar that the underlying stock moves. So if Tesla moves up $20 to 800, that call is going to move up $10. Why? Because it has now moved from at the money to in the money. Now it's going to start moving more like stock, and it'll start moving 60 cents for every dollar, 70 cents for every dollar, eventually dollar for dollar with the stock. And understanding how that works, Cam, when all of a sudden the light came on for that, it was like, oh, those are deltas. 50-cent move means it's 50 deltas. 70-cent move means it's 70 deltas, and so forth. And you could sort of figure it out then, and I'd go, okay, so if I bought 2 of these and sold stock, I'm neutral, as they say. I'm delta neutral. I own 2 of the at-the-money 780 calls, and I'm short stock at 780. Now, the calls can only go to 0, but the stock could, as we saw last week, move $200 or $300. So that is what's known as a back spread, where I've got twice as many calls as I'm short stock, and I can then scalp. So I started doing things like that in the markets, and I started, seeing outsized returns for my trades. I started seeing, we used to not so much joke about it. We wish it was still here, but, on good days, traders that knew what they were doing, we're making an awful lot of money. I mean, you could go from, I bet from my progression from 3 months into the stock and options trading world to a year later, I probably went from making $2,000 a day in the, as I was getting better and better at it in my first 3 months, to all of a sudden when I started throwing options in there, you were doing 50,000 a day, 100,000 a day. And you're just like, holy crap. I mean, again, the money could just roll in. You still had to be right. You had to be either right on volatility, which of course is a direct influence on the premium of the options. So you had to all of a sudden become, and that caught me several times when I was a young trader, because I'd be way too long vol, as they say, volatility, or premium, and theta, which is time. Theta would crush you because you're long too much vol. And if the vega, volatility, starts coming in and theta, time, starts going by, you're losing money hand over fist. So to say that, yeah, you could make 50 in a day or 100,000 in a day, that's all factual. But the contra to that is if you're not watching it, and if you're all of a sudden caught in a volatility trap or whatever, you can lose hundreds of thousands, over days and weeks very quickly. And it's a nasty situation to be in. And that's why you need to understand when you're doing complex spreads. Most people these days that are trading, that Pete and I are talking to and so forth, most of them aren't doing complex trades. Why? They don't need to. They're just picking a direction. And they're saying based on unusual activity or based on earnings, potential for an earnings beat or whatever, I'm going to go long or I'm going to go short, and I'm going to do it by buying calls or by buying puts. And they don't need to spread as aggressively as we did when we were, making a book, if you will, when we're trading against the whole market. But those skills that you learn are worth their weight in gold if you can apply those kinds of principles to any kind of trading.
So I'm kind of curious, you made a bunch of money trading and you built and sold businesses for multi-million-dollar exits. For most people, they'd end up on a sunny beach somewhere, retired. What is it that makes you stay in the game?
Really, I'm an adrenaline junkie. I mean, really, seriously, I have, it's a problem, Cam. You might suffer from the same thing, I'm not sure. To get those endorphins going off, I love it, and so I do it in the gym, and I love that feeling, so I work out 5 days a week. It's both a discipline, because I get up really early in the morning to do it, and I love the feeling, like I say, of those endorphins or adrenaline. And the same is true when I ski, when I, play sports and when I trade. When you trade and you're making money, as you would agree, I'm sure, there are only a couple things on God's earth that are as good as that feeling. And a lot of them are illegal. But the good news is that the stuff that you can do, you can trade and make money. And, of course, when you're doing it on a daily basis and it's not just a hit and run, but you're just doing it, it is like applause. And so, like I say, I'm addicted to it. I think I'm more addicted to it than Pete is. Pete likes it, but he does it because he likes making money. I do it because I like making money, but I really like the feeling. And for me, so in other words, at some number, I'm sure Pete could walk away. I don't know if I could. So when we sold Mercury Trading to Ken Griffith and Citadel, we just basically said, okay, what's the next thing? So we started building Trade Monster, which was a brokerage firm, and Option Monster, which was a subscription business and education. Ultimately, we sold Trade Monster to E-Trade for $750 million. That didn't all go to John and Pete, but we were majority shareholders. And then we just went back to the education and subscription and mentoring and coaching stuff and said, let's build this out. Let's make this the next big thing. And there was CNBC nice enough to put us on air and let us reach hundreds of thousands of folks every week through their programs.
Really is amazing. I'm wondering if you have to increase your size or your risk all the time to get that same adrenaline hit that you were talking about.
No, I don't. At least me. Again, you're asking me, so I can't speak for other people. But I'd say no. I get the same kick out of making, $1,000. As long as it's a win, because it's kind of like, an endorsement of your view. I'm sure that gamblers have that same sort of thing as far as, I'm going to bet on Kansas City. I think they're going to come back in the second half and beat San Francisco. And then it happens, and they're like, yeah, I kind of knew that. I'm not saying I did. I was rooting for them, but I'm not saying I had no bet on that. I had a bet on J-Lo, whether or not she would, I think there was some sort of prop bet on whether or not J-Lo or Shakira would have a wardrobe malfunction. I had a bet on that.
Right.
But that $50 vaporized.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame. So what are a few things that you would try and let new traders know about the markets and maybe how it's different from back in the day when you started?
That you can trade practically for free, but that you're not getting paid to trade. So, be a little judicious about it. Just because you can trade for free or damn near for free, depending where you are, doesn't mean you need to have a gun to your head to trade. Treat yourself like a gambler in Vegas. If they didn't beat you up when you were, I guess you like the tables too, but in Vegas, they throw you out for counting cards. Not in poker, but obviously in blackjack. So, and most really good poker players know the odds, and that's just a known that they let you do that. Also, you're not playing against the house usually. The house is just the house, and you're playing against the other players. In blackjack, you're playing against the house. The other players can screw your game up by taking cards when they shouldn't, but you're playing against the house in blackjack, and that's why when you count cards, they'll throw you out. In trading, they let you count cards. They let you stay there, and I like to say, Cam, that the difference is they buy you drinks in Vegas. And they buy you drinks, by the way, because for the most part, people are chumps, and they want to get you drunk. They're not buying you drinks because they're nice. We all know that, or at least most of us. But people will sit at tables and, just slosh themselves and then ruin their odds. And, if I could play that guy in poker or that gal in poker, I would. But if they're at a blackjack table, I don't want to be there because they're going to screw up the deck for me because I'm counting cards. When new people come into trading, especially now when trading is so inexpensive. They should be aware that they should always wait until the odds favor them to make the investment instead of just saying, well, it's not really costing me anything, because that's not the point. The point is that you're going to lose money if you don't wait, if you're not patient.
So between trading and growing and selling businesses and sports and fitness and family life, it really seems like you're getting the most out of this world. I follow you on social media, and I've noticed that you do bits and pieces with Grant Cardone.
10X, I love that.
Can you tell me, is Grant, does he have that much energy in real life?
Yes, he is all energy. Grant Cardone, folks, great guy. He runs he used to be basically a motivator for sales, and he still is, but he began buying properties and then letting people co-invest with him. Eventually, he turned it into a REIT. It's a privately, but it's SEC registered, but it's a REIT, and he pays out monthly the dividends. As you guys know, under a REIT structure, you have to pay out 95% of the income in the form of a dividend, and he does that every month. I think he's got a little over $1.5 billion now in REIT, and it's not commercial for the most part. A little bit of it is, but it's almost exclusively residential, 300 units on up, and he's killing it. And he does these huge events that he calls 10X, like 10 times as big. And I believe the first 10X was last year at the leading up to the Super Bowl. He did it at the Marlins Stadium in Florida for 3 days and got over 30,000 people there. This year, I'll be out there in 10 days, I think. I'll be out there in Vegas with him. And it's a one-day conference, although there's a super high end where it's, an obscene amount of money to go to the second day. But the regular day is going to have about 12,000 people in the convention center in Las Vegas. It's going to be amazing. And it's sold out, but he's going to have Snoop Dogg, Kevin Hart, Magic Johnson, Rick Ross, Brad Perscale, the guy that runs Trump's internet marketing, Scooter Braun, the guy that found Justin Bieber and bought Taylor Swift's catalog for $300 million. It's going to be fabulous. And this will be the first time that I'm on a stage that big with him. I've done other events with him in front of hundreds of people, but in front of 12,000, Cam, that'll be something. He is just Mr. Energy. I love him. And his wife is likewise Elena Cardone. She is Ms. Energy. And it's going to be a fun time. I think he's going to put it up. I think you have to register, but I think he's going to put it up for free as well after the event. I don't think it's going to stream live. But, yeah, he's just a brilliant marketer. He is Mr. 10X. And I hope we can get him at our conference in September, because we're doing one in Vegas. And Nate was great enough to show up last year at ours. And we're hoping that this one's going to be even bigger at the Aria Casino, Hotel and Casino in Vegas.
Speaking of Vegas, you were an attendee and presenter at the last Traders for a Cause. It might be cool to hear about what your impressions were from the events. I'm
so impressed that, that Nate and Scott Herman and these guys got together and started this great thing where they've raised over $1 million for charity, for breast cancer. It's been for ALS research. It's been for pediatric cancer. Those are the ones that come to mind off the top, but it's great. And it's also another opportunity for people to network, because I can't emphasize that enough. If you're upstairs by yourself and you're trying to make it in the market, it's really, really hard. But when you meet, you don't have to have a huge crowd. It doesn't have to be 1,500 like in our rooms or something, but it could be that you have 5 other guys and gals that you like bouncing ideas off and seeing, hey, that's a great trade. I would have missed that one or whatever. it's surprising, but the people that attend these are really good traders, and they're very generous with their time. So I've totally enjoyed the Traders for a Cause experience, and I think they do great work. And I think everybody that's attended, I've never heard of anyone say that it wasn't just a great time. It's a couple days in Vegas with friends or people that become your friend. How can you not like that?
I can't argue with you on that. So we're just about to jump into the speed round. I'm going to let Nate hit you with a few questions.
Cool.
All right, John. Who do you want to jump across the desk and tackle the most from CNBC? Is it Josh, Scott?
I love them all. Come on, you know, I love them all. They're all good guys and gals. Who would I love to be in a foot race with, or who would I love to race down a mountain, or something like that? But yeah, I'm not a hater, so they're all friends, and I'll leave it at that.
All right. Nate first, John. Who makes it down the slopes first?
Wow. I haven't seen you ski, man.
Gonna have to do it. You're gonna do a trip out west.
Let's do it. We should do it, or I'd even come out there, except I hear that Vermont is a lot of ice.
Yeah.
But I grew up skiing ice too. I mean, I did a little bit of the growing up skiing in Tahoe, but the rest in Minnesota, and that's all ice. So I would love to race with you, Nate, and we should do it. We could even maybe we could even do one or two for charity.
Sounds good to me. What's your most embarrassing moment on CNBC?
One time, an analyst with a very thick French accent came on, and I imitated his accent, and I was immediately embarrassed for doing it because I said, well, do you think really that perhaps this is not a buy here? And the desk was silent. Nobody said a word, and I was just like, what a screw off. what a terrible idea.
That's funny.
So that would probably be one of the worst, I'd say.
Who's the better trader, you or your brother?
That's tough. Pete is, I'm going to say Pete. For instance, I think I've told you this before, perhaps privately, but when Pete was trading for us in AOL, this is when it was an $80 stock, he would swing $80 to $100 million a day in and out of that stock. And I've never seen anybody else do that. And, you know, certainly there are some people that are hedge fund managers that have done that kind of stuff, Nate, but this is a guy on the floor. So he can trade size better than just about anybody I've ever seen, because that's a whole different skill set. You have to almost, leave your body to be able to trade that kind of size, because once I get up over, 50,000 shares or something, I'm sweating. And it's really hard to extend further than that. Yet Pete can get up there and, swing 100,000 shares, push it to 500,000. And like I say, I've seen him be 80 million deep in trades in AOL. And I'm just like shaking my head going, I couldn't sleep. If that
Yeah, I don't know. Crypto, bullish or bearish?
Bullish, but only on two, Ethereum and Bitcoin. Everything else is trash. I'm a maximalist, sort of. A true maximalist, as you know, means it's only one. That's max. That's that one, Bitcoin. And I think that one goes because of the limited supply, Nate. Assets gather their value by their scarcity. So I think that's the reason that Bitcoin's the one to own.
Awesome. Chicago or New York?
Chicago for living, New York for eating.
California or French wine?
French.
California
California became too sweet for me. Maybe my daughters implanted this in my head, too much, Nate, but they both told me at separate times that, Dad, we heard in school that your taste buds change every 7 years. Not like a light switch, but they migrate, and things that you liked 7 years ago, you might find you don't find nearly as tasty today because your taste buds change, not your taste in movies, not your taste in music, but your taste buds. And I think for me that happened, and that's why California's just taste too jammy, too many of them. There are certain ones, of course. I mean, I love Scarecrow. I love Coppola's wines, like Inglenook and things like that didn't even used to be great. They used to be when they first started, and then they went downhill, and then he bought them, and he's brought them back. But there's an awful lot of them I like, but if I had to, I'd take a good Gigondas or Côte Rôtie or Chateau Neuf de Pape over most California.
And maybe in 7 years that'll change.
Maybe that'll change. Exactly.
Favorite activity outside of trading?
Skiing. Didn't even have to think about it.
Is your goatee natural or enhanced?
Natural, although it would be whiter on one side. So the makeup artists darken it up on one side. Because if I grew a beard, basically one side, I'm thinking which side now. The left side, I would have far more gray hair in the left side than the right side of my face. And so it looks kind of funky. So I don't grow a beard. Instead, I just have the goatee, and they darken up the left side.
Biggest thing market commentators get wrong?
They don't understand what it feels like to win or lose in trading. So they think it's all just, you're just, managing money, or you're just trading. And they don't know that it, as much as we like to dismiss it, there's a lot of emotion there. And so I think they get that wrong. They don't understand what it's like. And I think there's some people on the desk, and I won't name names, but I think there are some people on the desk that don't really know what it's like either, but they like to talk about it. And I think you and I can probably tell which traders those are that don't really trade, that are sort of wannabe traders.
Yep. Best and worst trade?
Worst trade was I was sitting on a board of a publicly traded company and didn't sell it when it shot to the moon, and I should have stepped off the board and sold it. But because of my support for the leadership, I did not. And I watched, easy 8 figures turn into 7 figures really quickly. That was a bad trade. Good trade. Hopefully they're still to come, but so far I'd say just ahead of a big, or what we thought would be a big product introduction, we loaded up on calls, and it came through. And we had, looking back at it now, we had over 70% of the open interest in the calls when that move happened. So that was a very good day.
Wow. All right, and last but not least, a little bit rapid fire. The first word that comes to mind on the next 5 things.
Okay.
Elon Musk.
Genius.
Josh Brown.
Funny.
Market rebellion.
Smart.
Crypto.
Risky.
Traders for a cause.
The best. Or let's see, one word. Generous.
Awesome. Now we'll switch it back.
Okay.
Cam can go ahead and take that.
Thanks, Nate.
So, John, for people who want to find out more about what you're up to and also what your details are on social media, where should they find you?
Well, if they go to marketrebellion.com, they can see what we're all about. When you type that in from your browser, it'll take you to our homepage, and they can see all the different subscriptions, because we have a futures trading room that's in beta testing right now. But we've got an option trading room. We've got a cash flow portfolio that Pete runs, which is basically owning stocks and selling calls against the calls that he's buying in that portfolio. We've got unusual option activity. That's the one that we talk about on TV every day for unusual activity. We've got just a whole bunch of great offerings under subscriptions, under education. We've got coaches both in Chicago and Florida, as well as mentors both places. Mentors can be something that's one-on-one, so can coaching, I guess. But those are some of the most popular things we offer, Cam. So if they go to marketrebellion.com, they can see all about that. And if they go to marketrebellion.com/Vegas 2020, they can see all about that big event we've got going on in September out in Las Vegas. That's going to be fabulous. I hope you get out there, Cam, because like I say, Nate was out with us last year, and it was a fabulous time, and hopefully we can get you away from the tables long enough to come in.
You know, I'm going to be that way for Traders for a Cause around that time of year. So my arm is very easily twisted when it comes to
all right. Well,
a long weekend in Vegas.
September 25th and 26th. So
okay,
I'll
cool.
start applying the pressure probably in August on you
Sounds
to twist
good.
your arm.
Awesome. Well, I really, really appreciate your time today, and I'm sure all the listeners to the Investors Underground community and the YouTube channel have really enjoyed us getting the chance to have a chat today. So thanks so much. That was a lot of fun.
Well, I enjoyed it as well. Thank you so much, and have a great one, Cam. I appreciated talking with you and Nate today.
Thanks so much, Jon.
Thank you.